There are so many ways for students to share their voices as student leaders. For some of us, it might be by speaking out at a local school board meeting. For others, it might be creating and distributing artistic zines. But another great way is through student journalism, through a school newspaper, site, or blog. Our next speakers probably know this better than anybody on the planet about how to get students involved in student journalism. Esther Wojcicki is a leading American educator, journalist, and influencer, frequently known as the godmother of Silicon Valley. She is the co-founder of Track.app, the world's first peer-to-peer gamified learning platform. And Esther is joined by Katina Paron, an award-winning journalism educator and editor. She has helped thousands of teens develop their voice through training and mentorship opportunities. She's also the host and author, or she's also the author of a NewsHound's Guide to Student Journalism, and edits The Future is Miss, a teen-written column for Miss Magazine. Together, the two of them bring a whopping joint 65 years of journalism experience. So everybody turn your ears on and start listening. Esther and Katina, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for that great introduction. This is such an exciting opportunity to talk to so many young people who are excited about the world they live in, excited about school. And the fact that you're here right now means you're the right person to start a journalism program at your school. And Esther and I are going to show you how.
Yes, we're both really excited about it because we both have seen the power of giving kids control. I mean, it's not just control in the classroom for the time that you're there. It impacts your entire life. Mm-hmm. You have a sense of empowerment that helps you be a leader, whether you're going to go into education or government or doctor or lawyer or engineer, whatever. It gives you a sense that you can do it, and also it gives you a voice. We teach you how to communicate really effectively, both verbally and in writing on all the platforms. So we're really super excited to be here with you. You guys are an amazing group. I've been watching a lot of the talks and I've seen some of the great questions you've had.
Wonderful. I'm going to start sharing. I'm going to share my screen and we can start with our presentation. And we'll make sure to leave 5 or 10 minutes at the end for questions, because I know for both Esther and I, that's the most exciting part. So let me go ahead and start this presentation. Okay, so, we can go, there you go. So why you need high school journalism, why every school needs high school journalism. The first thing is it builds community. One of the reasons why newspapers and journalism was really started off was to tell people what's going on in the place where they live. In a high school, that's even more important, whether you're a small high school or a large one, that this idea of uniting everyone in this common theme is what the newspaper helps to do. It informs you so you're able to make decisions about your lives, about your community, about your school. And the paper helps bring people together. And it's not only the people on staff who are working on it, but by having a shared understanding of the situation that you're in the classroom, just the different rules that schools have, it really unites that as a community. So if you feel, especially one of the great examples of this was during pandemic when school was virtual, where everyone spread out. For those schools that had publications, that had a journalism program, a broadcast, a newspaper, there's a unity within that in the community because of that publication. And that's the power that journalism has to unite people. It's also this concept of participatory civics, right? Young people, you can't vote, you can't do all these other things that they say this, but what makes you a civic being, as an active person in your community. But you can do journalism. So it's an action-focused skill that you can do that not only betters your community, but makes you part of it. And I always like to say that it also helps you understand your place in the community. It helps you understand that you have a place in the community by doing journalism, by reading about what is happening in your school. And that's really why, one of the strongest reasons why every high school should have a high school newspaper. Esther.
So also, one of the things we all know about is that local news is dying. And so high school journalists can actually fill that role. You guys can report on the local news and everybody's going to want to read your paper. And if you have then power, the power of the press. And there's nothing more important actually for the local community than to know what's going on in their community. And you as teenagers can have that, play that role. And at the same time, you get to build community. And by the way, you get better grades. All the research shows that kids that are involved in journalism, somehow it impacts their entire schedule and their grades go up all over the place. So it is something that you might want to think of as a really important thing for you to do. If your high school does not have a newspaper yet, you can be a leader and help set that up. And also I should just tell you that Katina, she has a great book, which we're going to talk about at the end, that actually gives you step-by-step directions on how to do that. And I have a lot of resources also. So Katina, maybe you want to talk about the age of digital media.
Sure. And one thing I want to add, I'm going to add one note onto the local news idea is, especially think about this during the pandemic when nobody else was writing about what was going on in terms of like, how is your school handling like the mental health aspects of being virtual, or nobody else was writing about how your school is what are the community, the rates, the COVID rates in your school. These are things that the high school newspapers are doing across the country. And these are reasons why, if no one else is writing about these issues, is why it's most important that you need to. And you're already publishers. When you're reposting something on social media, or you're writing your thoughts on something on social media, that makes you a publisher, that makes you a journalist. This is the age of digital media, and you can use those skills in a way to support the school community and to really get the information out. One of the goals of being a journalist is to be a watchdog. And high school journalists are watchdog of their administrators, of the school district, of everything that's happening in the school. And it's not just pointing out, here's what you're doing right or wrong. It's really understanding what are the issues affecting the community that we're living in, and how can we share these stories? What are these untold stories that you'll see outside of your school community, and you should also see those inside. And that's one of the benefits of having a high school journalism program. We want to show you a few examples of some really strong kind of like community changing high school journalism. So here is a story from Kentucky. The Manual Red-Eye in Kentucky is a high school newspaper. And they wrote about the police force, the Kentucky State Police, using Hitler quotes in their training videos, which is huge and dramatic, and came out shortly after all the Black Lives Matter protest. And so this was something that was on people's minds, right, of how police are treating people. And this high school newspaper wasn't a school story, but it was a community story, found out that they were using Hitler quotes, published it, and then the police captain, who had been there for 33 years, retired because of this. So this is an example of the power that high school journalists can have, not only in their school, but in their community as well. Esther, do you want to talk about this school?
I think you know more about it, so I think you probably should talk about it.
Great. So this is a paper in in Virginia, a school paper where they found out that the superintendent of a public school district sent their child to a private school. So one would think if you're head of a school district, you're sending your children to that school district, but this person was not. And the school wrote about it, and it became a big deal, became big news in this community of what the superintendent was doing and who found out about it. And this isn't the only case like that. There's been stories, all the time where someone finds out that the principal doesn't have the qualifications that they say they have. Here's another one from Georgia, where somebody who was running or someone who was part of their school district, the Board of Education, admitted they didn't graduate from the school, even though he said he did. School newspaper got wind of this, wrote about it, published the story, and then it unfolds from there. And these aren't unusual situations that happen. These are things that happen in all throughout the country in all school newspapers. It's not that these are the three I had to dig hard to find. Every time I do a presentation like this and I'm looking for examples, there are always stories of young people breaking news, young people finding out things that nobody else was looking at. And that's kind of the perspective of being a young journalist. You have an insight on something that nobody else does. You have the insight, the perspective. You can talk to people that nobody else does. And we want you to use that in your journalism. We want you to become those reporters who uncover these stories, the things that keep you up at night, the questions you have about the world around you. Though that is journalism. And that's how you can start doing good journalism. What other things we want to talk about is kind of the culture of journalism. And because Esther she's graduated, what was it, 7,700, like hundreds and hundreds, 1,000 students from journalism programs in Kentucky, and I know Kentucky's in my head, in California. And she's going to tell us right now about what are some of the items she used to create a culture of not only fantastic journalism, but also a culture of independence and growth for young people. So I'm going to bring up that slide while you start talking, Esther.
So I have had many years of teaching journalism. I started in 1984, and the program only had about 20 kids at the time, and it grew today to be the largest in the United States. And the question was like, why are so many people wanting to take your class? What's going on? And so I wrote a book about it because I had too many questions, too many people, and I kept repeating myself over and over again. So I was like, I'll just write a book and give them the book. And so this is how the book is organized, and this is what the book says. This is the philosophy that I've had all these years, and it's called TRICK, T-R-I-C-K. And what TRICK stands for is trust, respect, independence, collaboration, and kindness. I say it belongs in parenting, belongs in the classroom, also belongs in your interpersonal relationships. But basically, I trusted my students, respected their ideas, gave them a lot of independence, didn't over control them, collaborated with them instead of dictating like so many classrooms, and always treated them with kindness. And people like, that really works? Well, all you have to do is talk to my students, because that's one of the reasons they took the class, because guess who ran the class? The students. It was student run. It had got academic credit from the University of California. The program grew to have, as I said, hundreds of students involved, 10 publications. We actually now this year even have an incubator where we allow students to come up with their own ideas for publications, and then we help support their idea. So we're developing a culture, which is the key, the culture of trusting a student. And if you just look in a lot of schools, there's very little trust of students. And nobody wants to be in a class where you're treated like you're not trusted or respected. Nobody. And so maybe you can show the next slide, which is the picture of my book. So it's called How to Raise Successful People, Simple Lessons for Radical Results. And so one of my good friends and who supports what I'm doing is also a journalist, Ariana Huffington, who started the Huffington Post. She said, how to raise successful people shows us how to be our best. So our children can be their best, but also how to teach in an effective way so students can be empowered. And I can tell you that one thing that happened in this pandemic is all the journalism programs succeeded. None of them stopped. They figured out a way so that everybody can collaborate from home on their own computer. And I think this never would have happened if students weren't passionate about making it work. If the teacher would have been in charge and said, hey, you guys, you all have to do this, no one would have done it. But the fact that they owned it, they ran all the Zoom calls, that made the big difference. So that's one thing that you might want to think about. California is a state which has rejected the Hazelwood decision. We have Ed code, I think it's 48907, which gives students, the power is in the hands of the students. You don't have to submit to prior constraint. You don't have to submit to having people look over your work before it's published. You get to write what you find and what you report in an ethical way. So that's one of the most important things that can happen for
Yeah, and I think part of that, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, Esther, but I think part of that is too, is like that, what you can see Esther talking about in terms of the independence and collaboration and that spirit of journalism in that way is why journalism is every, newspaper kid's, broadcast kid's favorite class. Their teachers are their favorite teachers. And it's because it's not the advisor or teacher in front of the room telling their students what to do or giving them all the same assignment. It's like, what are you thinking about? What's keeping you up at night? What questions do you have about this school? Go report that. So that inquiry-based exploration is so hands-on. That's why I love journalism and I love doing journalism with young people because of that hands-on approach. So we're going to talk next about a few different tips for starting a high school newspaper. So back to sharing my lovely screen. Let's see, can we advance? Yes, so resources for starting journalism club. So first of all, as Esther mentioned, there's this book that I happened to write, A NewsHound's Guide to Student Journalism. The link is there, there's a QR code and whatnot. So this book is a great guide for you to both help start your high school newspaper, but also understand what it means to be a journalist. It's a comic book based approach to teaching it. So there's, if you're into comics, I had a fantastic illustrator, Javier. You can see some of the characters there, and they're kind of showing you their own personal stories as they understand what it means to be a journalist in their high school, and this imaginary high school we made up. But it really also goes through the steps you need to know in terms of what is journalism compared to other type of writing, what is a lead, what are all these different jargon things that journalists use. So that's a first place to start. The next, here are kind of three key points, and Esther talked about one about knowing your rights already. That, in California, you have so many more rights than students in so many other states, and for the longest. Nobody else has had this many First Amendment rights for their students as California. An example that I saw recently was there's a school in Florida that their yearbook, it was a middle school, their cover of their yearbook had a Black Lives Matter photo on it, and it got pulled. The principal wouldn't let the yearbook run. They wouldn't let it be distributed. That is not something that would have happened in California. That's not allowed to happen, and in other states that is. So you want to know where that is. The other thing is you want to approach your favorite teacher. So kind of you're thinking about what do we need to know? You need a teacher to be on your side, and you need them to act as the advisor for this publication. It could be your favorite teacher in any subject. When Esther and I were talking about this, one of the things she said before was you're looking for a teacher who lets you revise. You're looking for the teacher who helps you grow, watches you grow, and lets you do that on its own. So that's kind of the first step, is if you want to start a program in your school, find a teacher in any subject. Doesn't have to be English, doesn't have to be social science, it can be whatever subject, and ask them if they will be your advisor. Esther, do you want to talk about the student part of it for just getting going?
Sure. Well, I mean, it says here, according, you've suggested 3 to 5 students. But actually what happens is when you start with 3 to 5 students, everybody wants their friend. And so it might start with 3 to 5, but then it grows pretty fast because this is something you're doing with your friend, and it's supported or should be supported by the school. So it's like how to have a good time with your friends supported by the school. And that's one of the things that's so important. And then if you run into any problems, you just check out this thing. I'm not kidding, go online. Ed code 48907, it gives you all your rights, and you have a lot of rights to write about things that you think are important. Can be news, features, sports, reviews, whatever you guys want to write. And it's really easy to do today because, all you have to know how to do is a little bit of software, a little bit Adobe. Adobe has great software. It's InDesign. If you can't afford that, there's even free software that'll allow you to use to make a newspaper or a magazine, either one. So that's what I suggest you do. And then printing, you can save your issue that you make on this website called Issue, ISSUU. And ISSUU allows you to save it in a PDF format on the website. There's another company called Apprentice, and Apprentice will allow you to print the magazine. And I'm not kidding, you can print like a 24-page magazine, maybe 28-page for $1 per magazine. I think that's a bargain price, and it's color. So there's school newspapers online, which is another good place where you put your newspapers online. If you want to upload it, they charge a little bit. And schoolprinting.com. So those are all resources for you. The Journalism Education Association helps teachers learn how to do what, if they don't know how to do it, no problem. They'll show you how to do it. There are a lot of resources out there. And the thing that's important is not to be afraid to ask questions. And the teacher has to present the same attitude. Don't be afraid to try something new. It's exciting, and you can do all kinds of fun things with it. And there was a question that I saw before I even started that was like, how do you get more people to read your newspaper in your community? Like, how do you improve circulation? Well, so one of the ways you can do that, first of all, is have interesting stories. And the second thing you can do is hand it out at lunch, because I'll tell you, everybody is going to read it at lunch. If you hand it out at the end of the day, everybody wants to leave. But if you hand it out at lunch, everybody's, they're still stuck there. So they have to do something. So this is exciting. And so there's all these things, the media outlets for teen writers. Here's an email address for you to, or a link for you to check that out. And then also I have this website. It's called tract.app. And if you go to create.tract.app, you can actually create learning for younger kids about like how to write a news story, how to write a feature story, or you can do anything that you want for the most part. You can like, what are orangutans doing in the African jungles, whatever. So tract.app allows teenagers to be content creators. And if you're interested, please go to create.tract.app and find out more about it. And teenagers are welcome, and you also get a small stipend. It's kind of like an internship. So there is my publicity. Hopefully you guys all follow it.
And all of these resources we're going to share with this slideshow we shared with you. So you'll see like that list of, you'll get a link for if you're a teen writer and want to get published outside of your school, or if you want more information about how to get involved with, there's a Slack channel for student journalists that was on the list. So you'll get access to all of that when you get this PowerPoint. You also see all of our contact information here. I'm going to stop sharing now because I believe we have, looks like the Q&A is full of questions. I'm super excited to hear what people want to know.
That's really
Yeah,
exciting.
definitely. Well, first and foremost, Katina and Esther, that was just an awesome presentation. We loved hearing everything about student journalism. And as you all know, the Q&A has been blowing up recently. So I will pull up some questions. Our first question is there a future for student journalism? I'm asking because, parents, ...
I mean, parents have nothing to do. Honestly, yes, there's a huge future for them. You mean in terms of like, are there jobs after when you graduate? Or will parents stop you? I think there's a lot to be said about the impact that you can have with journalism. If you're, whether the hours, there's no good schedule in journalism, the hours always suck, the money's not great. But once you find a passion in something and you're able to make you're making change with it, that impact, right? If you write a story and it changes a law in your community, your parents are going to see that you're doing more than just journalism and just writing. It's really about being part of a community and making lives better for others. It's a community service. Whether or not you study, you know, if your parents want you to go to med school and you're studying and you want to be a journalist, you can do both. You can still write, you know, and it can help you. It can help your career as a journalist if you go to med school. But you can always write, you can always create, you can always be a part of the journalism community, whether or not you are a full-time working journalist too. So it's the idea of right now telling your stories in the school environment, and using that as a power of change.
So I want to add to that. So my theory is this is the century of media. Okay. And if you don't believe me, just look at who is influencing the world. Social media. And social media, all those people have some kind of social media or journalism training. So you don't just have to go and be a journalist at a newspaper. You can, there's so many things you can do with being a journalist, and you can earn a really good living as a social media influencer, or doing PR work, or doing anything connected with technology and social media. Yeah. And all the research shows that the most influential people in anyone's life, they're not the president of the United States. It's kind of surprising who they are. It's your friends. Your friends have more influence on what you think than any, and you're not alone. Everybody has that same thing. So I think that being a journalist gives you that opportunity to be an influencer, and of course, an influencer for good, if possible. And yeah, that's pretty exciting. Okay, next question.
Got it. These are just coming at you guys. Okay. What is your advice for incoming younger classmen on finding their artistic style and voice in journalism?
Well, my advice is, and what I did in my class, I just let them try whatever they liked. They kept trying different things until they came up with what they liked. And so my classes were, they started in the 10th grade, 10th, 11th, and 12th. And I'll tell you, nobody ever left. And it's because they kept switching. Sometimes they'd write sports, and sometimes they'd features and reviews or opinion or columns or whatever. And that's how you learn. You learn what you like by doing it, not by someone telling you what to do or how to do it. As a matter of fact, I think that's a damper, you know, and I would give them advice on if it wasn't good, it's like just revise. Nobody ever had grade issues, even though this was an academic A to G University of California class approved. They just had to revise. And so there was no grade pressure, and that worked. So that's what I would advise them to do. Try it all, see what you like.
Yeah, and to add to that, you're learning the basics while you're trying it all, right? So be flexible with your own style and try out different styles while you're figuring out what are the journalistic basics, or what are the basics of communication, how to tell a good story, how to write a good sentence. And within all that, you know, and your style may change over time, and it may change based on what you're writing about, but that you should never try to hide that. You should never be like, oh, I write like this, or I come from this perspective, and your perspective can also be your style, that you don't want to hide that, that should be part of what makes you a great journalist.
Awesome. Well, Katina and Esther, it looks like we're out of time, but this has just been such a splendid opportunity and conversation for us. One quick shout out one more time for everybody to go pick up a copy of a NewsHound's Guide to Student Journalism, and for everybody to check out the track.app and to create a course when you guys have some time. They both seem like great opportunities and resources. So once again, thank you all so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you all soon, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much. This has been lovely.